Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unfinished Business. I am Rogette Harris, and I look forward to having conversations with you every week. It's hard to differentiate between fact and fiction in today's culture and political landscape. Every week, this show will take a journey through the news of the day and current events. Tonight, my guest is Charlie Gerow, CEO of Quantum Communications and Republican commentator for CBS 21. We will discuss the next steps now that the voting has concluded in the 2020 election. Why do Americans like to have a divided government? Has a winner in the presidential race even been decided? And whether or not I'm running for office. Please subscribe to watch our weekly show on YouTube at Rogette Harris. Also, feel free to send a comment, show idea, or just say hi to rogetteharris@gmail.com. Let's get busy and solve some unfinished business. Hello, and we are back. With me, I have Charlie Gerow, CEO of Quantum Communications and a Republican commentator on CBS 21. How are you this evening, Charlie?
I'm doing well. It's nice to be with you.
Great. So I would like to talk a little bit, not necessarily about the election, but where we kind of move on from here. So my first question is probably the most obvious. Do you really think the election at this point can be overturned?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. This afternoon, the Commonwealth Court, as you know, came down with a very important order. I understand it's a one-page order, but I haven't even had a chance to see it yet because I've been out working for a living. But that looks to me as though this has been set in motion to go all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. And the Supreme Court has clearly left the door open on the question of whether or not Secretary Buchvar and the Wolf administration significantly overstepped their bounds by not following Pennsylvania law. So we'll have to see.
My understanding, though, is that it only equates to around 10,000 ballots, which, as you know, Vice President Joe Biden is around 45,000 votes ahead. So it wouldn't be enough to, even if those votes were thrown out, it wouldn't be enough to overturn the vote totals.
Well, it may or may not. I mean, that's not the only issue that's in play, as you know. There are a significant number of issues in play. That's just one of them. So, again, we're going to have to wait and see.
But do you think this really helps with unity? And I understand this isn't the same thing as 2000 with Al Gore and George Bush. But don't you think that one of the things that helped start to unite the country was when Al Gore graciously stopped the court battles and he gave his concession speech and he wished President George Bush well and asked his voters and supporters to also support the president for the good of the country.
When did he do that, Rogette?
Well, he did that in December.
Exactly. I mean, so we've got plenty of time before we get to the Al Gore deadline. Plenty of time, over a month.
And I'm not saying that, I mean, I personally don't think that these court battles are going to amount to anything, but I will admit that the president has the right to ask for a recount. Now, I think asking for a revote is going a little too far, but I understand why he's going to ask a recount, especially in states like Georgia, which is supposed to start tomorrow, I believe. But it doesn't seem like, remember months ago, President Trump has been setting this up. If I lose, it's because they cheated. He would never say that there would be a peaceful transition. So it's almost like he spoke into existence what's happening now.
I don't recall him saying that. You'll have to give me that quote directly. I don't recall him saying that. You'll have to give me that quote directly.
Which quote?
That he would not allow a peaceful transition. I think that's
no,
more
he
democratic paraphrasing than anything
he
ever said. What's that?
No, he never said that. He never said
okay,
that. But when they asked,
don't say he said it. He didn't say it.
But he wouldn't agree to it. That's the point I'm making.
I'm happy to have a conversation about what has really happened and what has really been said, but I'm not going to have a conversation about paraphrasing somebody's remarks and making it into a statement, because that doesn't work for me.
But he did say if he lost, it was because the election was rigged. That he did
Well,
say.
there may be some evidence that there was some rigging in the election. Let's
But he
wait
said
and
that
see.
before we had
What
the election.
can I
He said,
finish, please? Are we going to debate this? I mean, if you want to have a discussion, I'm happy to. If you want to have a debate, we can do that too. But I think it's very important to put things into a little bit of context. You already did with the Al Gore thing. Over a month later, till he conceded. Hillary Clinton's advice, of course, to Joe Biden and company was to never concede. So let's, when we say about what's the issue with unity here, let's have the same standard for everybody. And the standard ought to be that the votes are all counted, that the results are certified, and then that the Electoral College meets and takes the second part of the presidential election process. That's how things work. That's how they're supposed.
are you still there?
I'm here. I'm right here. I didn't hear you. Did
You
you say
froze.
something?
You froze a little bit there.
Sorry about that.
Did you see Carl Rowe's op-ed today in the Wall Street Journal, where the title was that
I was out working. I was out working for a living today. I read the Wall Street Journal at night. I don't generally get a chance to do it during the day.
Well, I work for a living too, but I still saw that headline where he's stating that the election returns aren't going to be overturned. I mean, again, the argument isn't whether or not the president has a right to recount the votes. The concern is that if the result isn't what the president likes, he's not going to do what's best for the country. That's the.
Well, you're speculating, and you're welcome to do that. But I thought we were going to come here and talk about what's happening and what may. I don't want to speculate about what the president is or isn't going to do. I want to say, here's where we are. Here's the process, legal and proper. Not only the right of the president, but really Haitian. Joe Lieberman, who was on that ticket in 2000 with Al Gore, said, this is the right thing to do. And why is it the right thing to do? Because in America, we settle election disputes, particularly in closely contested elections, through the legal process. And now the legal process is through the courts. And so the courts are going to have their opportunity to work things out, to determine what did and didn't happen. In the states where recounts are allowed, you're going to have a recount. You may get to that point in Pennsylvania without having the results so-called overturned. You may get to a recount situation here. So let's wait and see. But to say, the president is or isn't going to do this is mere speculation. And I don't know on what basis anybody's going to speculate at this point.
Well, we can move forward, but I do want to point out that the president speculated that if he lost, it was because the election was rigged. So, well, he speculated months before we even had the election.
Let's see how much fraud turns up.
But I'm just pointing out that he did speculate. As you know, the transition process hasn't started, that the President-elect Biden hasn't been getting those morning briefings.
It's not the president-elect. That's perfectly clear. By any stretch of the imagination, Rogette, he is not the president-elect. The fact that the media has said that he is the projected winner is all well and good. You are not the president-elect until those various electoral colleges have met and cast their votes. The election isn't even over until that happens. So let's be a little bit clear about our language.
So there are, though, Republican senators who do think he should at least be getting those briefings in case the election results aren't overturned. So would you disagree with that opinion?
It's not up to me to make those calls. I'm not going to either agree or not agree. That's for folks who have a real opportunity to make a claim in that process. I'm not one. I'm a commentator. I'm not going to give advice unless it's solicited.
Well, let's talk about Pennsylvania. As you know, Pennsylvania had a very divided, mixed decision. As of now, in my opinion, President-elect Biden did win Pennsylvania, but then the Democrat Party lost 2 of the 3 statewide row office seats. As far as the congressional race is concerned, every incumbent won, but the Republicans did pick up some state legislature seats. Do you see the election results, if they stand, as overall very positive for the Republican Party here in Pennsylvania?
I do. And, look, there was not only no blue wave here, It wasn't even a blue trickle. If anything, there was a pretty significant red tide. If you accept the results as they stand right now, and I'll go along with you for right now, Joe Biden prevailed in the popular vote in Pennsylvania. But down ballot, races that we were told were going to be nod from Finn and Roberts and be the first statewide office. She got pretty well decimated. Joe Torsella, an incumbent, lost to a underfinanced candidate who, ran on shoe leather and not too much more. For the first time in 60 years, Republicans will control 2 out of those 3 statewide offices, and
Right.
the Shapiro race was much, much closer than he ever imagined. And as you correctly point out, in the legislature, the Republicans gained seats in the Senate and gained seats in the House. So I think there's a pretty strong message there.
Why do you think that is? If the election results stand, why do you think individuals vote for Joe Biden, but then obviously did not necessarily vote for the rest of the Democratic slate? Now, I have my opinion, but I'm curious to see what your...
Well, I think there are a variety of explanations. One is the elimination of straight party voting.
Yes.
2 is that folks really rebelled against Tom Wolf, his administration, the overreaches that they've made, the arbitrary and capricious decisions that they've made, punishing counties like Lebanon County here in the mid-state out of just vindictiveness and pettiness. And I think there was a strong reaction to that. That's why you saw the races in the state legislature go the way they did. Across the country, the American people clearly rejected the socialist model of the left wing of the Democrat Party. In state after state, the Democrats thought they were going to pick up control of the U.S. Senate, and they spent billions, that's with a B, in these states where they got annihilated. I mean, Susan Collins was projected to lose by double digits, and she won by double digits. So the polling industry had a bad night too, but so did the far left of the Democrat Party.
Regarding the coronavirus, since you brought that up with Governor Wolf, now my personal opinion is I think we need a balance as far as balancing the public health aspect of things, and then obviously we can't ignore the economic aspect of things as well. My opinion is that it seems like both parties picked a side and kind of left out those in the middle. Now, I personally think the governor did try to strike that balance, but I will acknowledge that there's still a large group of people who got hurt with that. I know people myself who lost their businesses and whatnot because of COVID-19. But don't you think Congress should be working together on getting another stimulus package together? Do you think we have a better chance of getting that now?
Oh, it's a shame. Yeah, and I mean, it's a shame that Nancy Pelosi walked away from the table because she couldn't get everything that she wanted. The legislative process very rarely does that. So, I'm relatively optimistic that they will come up with some additional stimulus. But ultimately, these lockdowns didn't work, and they especially didn't work when 2 things happened. When governors of states, Tom Wolf in particular, when his Secretary of Health took her mother out of a nursing home while they were taking folks from hospitals and sticking them into nursing homes, where a significant number of these deaths occurred in the 4 or 5 states that did that. I think they've got a lot of culpability and a lot to account for, and I think you began to see that in the November results. I think there's more yet to come.
Do you not think, though, that the president handled the coronavirus wrong with some of the mocking that he did? For instance, teasing people who wore a mask, kind of dismissing people who took it seriously, even when he himself and his family received the virus. So saying, see, it's not that big of a thing. Do you think that was part of the reason such a large portion of people left him and voted for Joe Biden?
Well, the Democrats certainly demagogued the hell out of the Wuhan flu issue. There's no question about that. I mean, everything they said was Donald Trump caused this worldwide pandemic. And, Joe Biden even went so far as to suggest that Donald Trump got the virus because of his own fault. I don't know that he said that, by the way, about Prince Charles or the Prime Minister of Great Britain or the President of Brazil or the Prime Minister of Russia or the president of Turkey, and these other places where world leaders got the thing as well. But, the issue of masks is a very interesting one. Who was the person that first told us that masks not only weren't necessary, but did a defined harm? That was Dr. Fauci, who the media fawns all over and props up as the great hope of us all on every issue imaginable. He's the guy that said, don't wear masks.
I'm sure you remember when President Obama was president that there was a group of voters who came out and voted just for him. We call them Obama voters, but they didn't necessarily come out and vote for other Democratic candidates unless Obama was on the ballot as well. Do you think that there is a section of Donald Trump's base that may be the same, that they're not necessarily Republican voters, but they are Trump voters?
Oh, yeah, there's no question about that, Rogette. I mean, Donald Trump had the ability, particularly here in Pennsylvania, to attract a significant, not even a significant number, a tremendous number of crossover voters from the Democrat rolls. I mean, you got to remember that Pennsylvania is a state that's registered more than 500,000 to the good of the Democrat Party. And Republicans do well statewide here requires a tremendous crossover ability. President Trump did that in 2016, winning the state for the first time in almost 30 years. And he again this year proved his ability to get a lot of people that were, as you suggest, Trump voters. And I think the challenge for the Republican Party now is to cement and grow that coalition of working class votes, minority voters. I mean, for all the crap we heard about Donald Trump's being a racist, he did better among minority voters than any Republican in your lifetime and almost in mine. In 60 years, he did the best of any Republican. I'm admitting now that I'm admitting I'm an old guy. Okay, you got me.
No, he did, and that definitely surprised a lot of people. But he did increase his base, even though a lot of people thought he did not. It's so interesting how wrong the polling was. But as you know, the control of the U.S. Senate is up for grabs, and that's who has the attention right now because of Georgia. And it just makes me wonder if Donald Trump isn't actively campaigning in Georgia, if he can get those voters out again for the Republican Party to keep control of the Senate.
Well, I think that's a good question. And I mean, I think that's one of the challenges for both sides. Donald Trump, is going to have to get out those voters that are his and may not care that much about anything beyond him. And the Democrats are going to have to get out folks that came out to vote against Donald Trump who may not be that motivated to come out and vote for the Senate. So I think that's a challenge for both parties. And believe me, you're going to see an incredible amount of activity in Georgia over the course of the next month and a half, and hundreds of millions of dollars poured into there from everywhere under the sun.
But, we saw races like against Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. We saw Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. It's not always the candidate that has the most money that wins, at least this year. Democrats outraised and outspent Republicans probably for the first time. And it did not work in a lot of key races.
You're absolutely right. I am happy about that personally because I don't think that money ought to be the controlling factor. But I mean, in South Carolina, which, as you know, is right next door to Georgia and has less big media markets, Democrat candidate there spent something like $100 million. Think about $100 million. It wasn't that long ago that we were running presidential campaigns on less than that, and he still lost. So I mean, the money thing, for all the palaver that we hear about dark money and big money, neither party has a monopoly on that game.
No, that's true. I do think it would be nice, and I think we might agree on this, if we could find a way to take the big money out of the campaigns. So it is more about the issues. Because I don't know about you.
I think you have money's always going to be in campaign. What?
I said, I don't know about you, but I was getting about 10 mailers a day. I was still getting a couple.
The most interesting thing was I went home yesterday and opened my mailbox and there was political mail. So somebody didn't get their money's worth.
Yes. Do you think, how important do you think the control of the Senate will be to, if the vote totals stay the way they are, to a Joe Biden administration. Do you think the fact that he does have 47 years in the U.S. Senate will help him work with Mitch McConnell and the Republicans to get some policies through?
Well, if Joe Biden becomes president,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of folks that speculate that the thing he wants the most is a Republican Senate, because a Republican Senate would be his foil and his shield against the nuttiness of the Democrat left. He wouldn't have to take any of the policy initiatives that they want to move forward, the Green New Deal and, tax increases above even what he's proposing, et cetera, because he can say, look, I can't get it through the Senate. I can't do it, even though I have friends there and was there for, 4.5 decades. So, there certainly are folks that think that that's a good situation for a President Biden. I think that, control of the Senate is going to be very, very, very important, because
Yes.
if the Republicans maintain control of the Senate, and I fully expect that they will, they're not going to allow anything dramatically affecting the future of this country to go through. They're simply not. You're not going to get the court packing schemes. You're not going to get the elimination of the Electoral College. You're not going to get the addition of states to the union, et cetera. It's going to be back to true normalcy rather than some quote unquote new normal.
What about the Tea Party movement? If things stay the way they are and Vice President Joe Biden does become president, can you see that sort of having a rebirth for people who might think that there was more fraud than what can be proven?
Well, I think the folks that think there is significant fraud out there are going to be very, very energized over the course of the next couple of years. I think you're going to see increased political activism on the conservative side. I think the left has had its political activism ramp way up during the Trump years,
Yes.
beginning with the resistance movement. The day he was elected, the resist, he's not our president stuff. And it just continued from there for the last 4 years. I think the conservatives now, who are very, very concerned about the results here, are in fact going to be extra involved, more committed, more passionate. The internet and social media is fueling a lot of that activity on both sides. So I think the midterm elections will be very, very interesting to watch.
Especially here in Pennsylvania, as you know, we're going to have an open U.S. Senate seat since Senator Toomey is retiring, and then Governor Wolf is term limited. So we're going to have an open governor position too. And then we are going to be
the race is already on. I hear you're running, Rogette, so you can make your announcement right here, and I can say I pulled it out of you. Can I hear it? She's running. You can tell. Whenever they don't say anything, it means they're really running, just so we're clear. All your listeners, she's running. But no, on both sides, there's going to be a plethora, there's your word for the day, of candidates. I mean, it's basically the Harrisburg phone directory on both sides. Joe Torsella's loss in the treasurer's race probably knocks one out of there. He might say, I'm going to run for a different office now. But you've got several statewide holders on the Democrat side that want to run for either the Senate or for governor. On the Republican side, you've got any number of legislators, some folks from the private sector, some folks from the business world. So you're going to see very robust primaries and a general election that will be more fun to watch than 2020.
And plus, we're going to have all new district lines with redistricting next year in 2021. So we have to see how that shapes out as well. That's going to be an interesting process.
And that will be a fascinating process too, because that's one of the reasons why control of these state legislatures is so important, is because we are in the redistricting year, and the courts, of course, play a role in that too. So you've got a Democrat Supreme Court here in Pennsylvania, a Republican legislature. So more fun, Rogette. So while you're launching your candidacy, you're going to have to deal with all these things.
Yes.
See? Got her.
I didn't say a specific office.
You said yes. You said, all I heard was yes. I didn't need to hear anything else.
Do you find it interesting how voters complain about, say, Congress has a lower approval rating than any president of either party, but yet we never seem to get a lot of change? it's hard to beat an incumbent. It's always like people like their own personal legislator, but they just dislike everyone else's.
Now that's a phenomenon that goes back literally 50 or 60 years, Rogette. They hate the Congress, but they love their congressperson. And
Right.
the rest of them are a bunch of bums, but mine, oh
Right.
my God, nice. So, you got to figure that at some point the confluence of all those white knights to lead to a really, really great Congress, but people don't see it that way. And, the benefits of incumbency aren't and shouldn't be lost on any of your viewers. I mean, incumbents have a tremendous power to be able to communicate with people both through the media and through using their taxpayer funded offices. And it's something that challengers from either party are without. And so to run against an incumbent member of Congress is a very, very tall order.
And the last topic I want to bring up to you, and we did talk a little bit about it in the beginning, is unity. One thing this election showed is that we are a divided country. I mean, both candidates got over 70 million votes, the most ever. So they both have very large bases of support. How does one start to bring that together?
Well, sadly, Rogette, if I could answer that question, I'd be at a pay grade much, much higher than I am. And I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, but we are, without any question, a divided nation. And both sides continue to put the blame on the other. And, the truth is that there's a lot of blame to go around. In some respects, voters want divided government. They clearly indicated that in their votes this year. They want checks and balances. But whether or not they want divided government with the ugliness that has gone along with that in recent years is another question altogether. I am an old guy, and I remember in work here in Harrisburg, the Democrats and Republicans would fight like cats and dogs on the floor. Some of the most brutal legislative battles I've ever seen. But then after hours, they go to dinner together. They break bread. And
Right.
somehow, for the good of the people of Pennsylvania, things got worked out. And they'd come back the next day, and the rhetoric might still be as harsh, but they recognized that it was merely rhetoric. It was talk. And what was really at the heart of things was a ability to compromise, which meant that nobody got everything they wanted, and an ability to deal civilly, pardon me, with the other side. So I'm hopeful that that can come back, that we can still fight it out on the floor. But as Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill's used to say, it was pistols at dawn, but cigars at dusk.
Right. Well, with that, I want to thank you for joining us. Is there any CBS 21? You do commentary. Can you tell the listeners what time and they can listen to your commentary?
From your side of the aisle, Rogette, is Mark Singal, the former lieutenant and acting governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and he and I do live commentary on C1 each Tuesday at 5:30. We do intermittent commentary, sometimes on Thursday, but sometimes on other days. And then Sunday morning, we have a magazine-style show called Face the State, which airs at 8:30 a.m. Sundays on CBS 21. And if folks really want to catch me, I'm sure all your Democrat friends do, it's charliegerow.com.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
My pleasure. It's nice to be with you, Governor.
Welcome back. In closing, I would like to read an opinion piece I wrote that was published in PennLive.com. It's a message to the Democratic Party after the 2020 election. Dear Democratic Party, wow, this was not the election any of us expected. Where was the blue wave? The Democratic Party was projected to pick up seats in Congress, possibly control the US Senate, and flip state legislatures. But instead lies one problem. How could this election be so close? In his third attempt, President-elect Joe Biden won the presidency on the message of unity and a pledge to restore the soul of the nation after 4 years of turmoil under President Donald Trump. He built a coalition of people of color, suburban women, young and old voters, with just enough independents and disaffected Republicans to win slim margins in key battleground states. Plus, Biden's running mate, Senator Kamala Harris, made history as the first woman and person of color elected vice president. At the end of the vote totals, Joe Biden and Donald Trump will have the first and second most votes ever in U.S. presidential election history. Biden is the first candidate ever to top 70 million votes, and Donald Trump is on the verge of crossing that line. Voter turnout is on pace to reach the highest level since 1900, when more than 73% of eligible voters voted. Despite his loss, Trump once again outperformed polls and increased turnout among his base of white working class voters in rural areas. Also, despite popular opinion, Republicans made surprising gains with Hispanics, African Americans, and Muslims. Trump won the largest share of non white voters of any Republican candidate in 60 years. Regardless of our personal opinions, elections are educational. Voters know more about their own lives, and they almost always tell us something important. The first thing we learned is that we live in a divided country, and the polls were wrong in every way. Voters told Republicans to go back to Republican principles without Trumpism. The Republican Party had a much better election than Donald Trump did. Republicans picked up several congressional seats and may keep control of the U.S. Senate. The Democrats, on the other hand, have yet to flip a single state legislature, meaning in many states, Republicans will control redistricting next year. In the meantime, voters told Democrats to focus more on policy and create a message that appeals. Even though the core of most Democratic policies are popular, there is a cultural wall built that keeps half of the country out. If there was ever going to be a Democratic blue wave, 2020 was it. But it did not happen. Pennsylvania alone was a mixed bag. Around 12 counties went blue for Joe Biden. Dauphin County was one of those counties, with Biden winning 53.6% of the vote, an increase of around 5 percentage points from 2016. However, the Democrats lost two statewide positions, state treasurer and auditor general, one of which was an incumbent. In addition, the loss of incumbent state legislature seats. Pennsylvania is not immune, as this happened all across the country. Voters told both parties to grow up and get to work. They want a balanced government. Neither political party is going to get everything they want. Like it or not, we must all work together. I cannot end this without bringing up Black women who continue to be the backbone of the Democratic Party. Black women propelled Joe Biden to the presidency. Not only did 91% of Black women vote for Joe Biden, according to an NBC News exit poll, but Black women have also been on the front lines of this year's election, working to ensure that all eligible voters have their voices heard at the polls. The contributions of Black women are even more significant because of the political climate we currently live in. As we continue to lead the battle and continue the fight for Black lives, Black men, and our own Black selves, our humanity is repeatedly denied and at times erased. Our stories are discounted or monetized by others, while our voices are often left out of the conversation, and our leadership often disrespected and opinions disregarded. It is not time to cry tears of joy just yet. Black women want and deserve a seat at the table. We continue to see that when the time calls for it, Black women show up. But who is there for us? We have helped the Democrat Party repeatedly, but what has the Democrat Party done for us? And no, Vice President elect Kamala Harris, a woman of color, is not enough. We deserve more than just one seat at the table. In closing, as we start this new chapter in American history, let us close this past chapter with the following: Donald Trump, you're fired.